Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Janet Hoder, and I'm the head of communications for CGIAR's Systems Transformation Science Group. I am one of today's moderators, and happy to welcome you to this session. As you all know, in your roles as decision makers, you face a host of challenges, opportunities, and trade-offs. And science doesn't have all the answers, but it can give us many of them. That is, if we can overcome the barriers that prevent science from being taken up into action. So recognizing this challenge, CGIAR is organizing a new report that will synthesize its research into an accessible format, specifically geared to help decision makers at local, regional, and global levels get the information that they need in an accessible format, really ready to help you as you need to formulate, develop, and negotiate evidence-based policies and investments. We're looking forward to bringing that report to you in early 2025. But today we're excited to bring you a conversation that's going to share some of the learnings that we've gleaned in the process of reaching out to people to understand the challenges that are faced in this space and how we can work together to overcome them. So this conversation is going to explore learnings from successes and failures in getting science taken up into action. And we have two panels. So we're breaking it up a little bit. No presentations. We know this is the end of the first week and everyone's been very busy with lots of different sessions. So really we're here today for a discussion. This first panel will lead us into this first panel is a conversation that's going to take a deep dive into a specific example of a successful endeavor, which involved government, industry, research, and community stakeholders. And this is going to be sort of fireside chat style, and it's going to be moderated by my colleague, Dr. Julianne Biddle, who is the lead research for CGIAR's inaugural flagship report. I'll turn over to Julianne.
Thanks, Janet. So I'll just start with an introduction about what we're actually going to talk about in this fireside chat. So for decades, Malawi has been struggling with foreign exchange shortages, widespread malnutrition, and food scarcity. Agriculture is crucial to Malawi's economy, contributing 30% of gross domestic product and employing about 80% of the active workforce. Hunger remains an issue. Between 2023 and 2024, it's been estimated that around 4.4 million Malawians, which is about 22% of the population, faced acute food shortages. Recognising the common bean as part of the solution, the Pan-African Bean Research Alliance, also lovingly known as PABRA, has been revitalising the bean value chain by fostering and maintaining partnerships to scale up seed production. By collaborating with the Ministry of Agriculture and its departments, the private sector, farmers and other stakeholders, PABRA has spearheaded interventions for nearly 30 years in Africa to maximise the legume's full potential. With this dynamic partnership, there is a promising transformation underway in Malawi's bean value chain. Since 1996, through PABRA, the Department of Agricultural Research Services, DARS, and the Malawi National Bean Breeding Program has released over 30 bean varieties with disease resistance, higher yields, early maturity, marketability, taste, and nutritional benefits and other traits. This has been achieved through partnerships between private sector suppliers to scale up seed supply of preferred varieties and ensuring ongoing supportive services like seed multiplication and technical support from the government and also the PABRA bean community throughout all parts of the seed production cycle. We've brought together today some of the decision makers that have been involved in that process, and we're really keen to hear the lessons that they've learnt. So I have with me Grace Mahengo, President of Grain Traders and Processors Association of Malawi. And I have Dr. Laurent Pungalini, Senior Deputy Director of Agriculture Research in the Department of Agriculture Research Services. So I'll kick off with Laurent, if that's okay to call you Laurent. So what are the challenges and opportunities that you see decision makers like you facing in the positions that you're in? So, and also if you could talk about the Parbra example and what you've learned in that experience.
Thank you so much. I think I'll start with the Pabra. In short, I think I can describe Pabra as a boat with all stakeholders in it, sailing across the sea to save people on the other side of the lake. Why I'm saying this? I think for the past 30 years, Pabra has demonstrated very strong public-private partnership. These are all actors involved in the bean industry to make sure that they develop and promote varieties of beans that are market-oriented. So, starting with the government, Pabra has not left behind the policyholder. So, all the work fits very well with the policy framework the government has in promoting crops which will contribute to growth of the country, and promoting crops which will address malnutrition in the country, and promoting crops which will actually contribute to improved security in the country. Besides the policyholder, I think Pabra has not left behind all researchers as technology developers. So the researchers are actively involved in hunting for new materials which will lead into development of varieties that are responding to market needs. In addition to that, Pabra has also actively engaged the extension system. These are promoters of the new varieties that are being developed by the scientists so that they reach to the farmers who are producers of the beans in country. And also, to complete the puzzle, Pabra has not left behind the private sector. I think you hear more on the engagement of public-private sectors who are actually mostly acting as off-takers and promoters of varieties to the markets. In addition to that, I think Pabra has made sure that they actively engage all stakeholders to mobilize resources so that they have a complete, resource basket to address bean development in the country. Regarding policy dimension, I think as government, we face quite a good number of challenges. I think one of them is the issue of trying to make sure that more resources are made available for the science bit. Because most of donors now, they're looking at how we can upscale. So science is neglected somehow. So as policymakers, we're trying our level best to mobilize resources so that we address the science as one of the key solutions to the problems farmers are facing. I think in brief, that's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So maybe we could hear the private sector perspective now, Grace. Are you able to share your experience about Pabra in Malawi? And then also, if you're willing to, what the potential barriers have been for engagement between scientists and the private sector and how Pabra is helping to overcome some of those?
Thank you very much. Let me start maybe by putting a statement that I want everybody to take home, which is that we can never attain food security without seed security. And seed is a science. So from that angle, I would want to start by tackling the issue of barriers, which is the main one being the issue of communication. There have always been a huge gap in communication between the scientists and private sector, including the farmer, who is supposed to be the key beneficiary of the materials that the scientists are coming up with. In terms of communication from scientists to our farmers, we are looking at an issue of what sort of information are the scientists sharing with the farmers for farmers to appreciate the work that the scientist is doing. One of it is in terms of, in relation to climate smart. They have a lot of climate smart varieties that they've developed in an effort to help contribute towards resilience to climate effects. But how many of our farmers are aware of those varieties? And what are the channels that the scientists are using to get the communication or the information to the users? That is a huge barrier that we have, and that's an area that collectively we need to look at to say, how do we get this important information to the farmers or to private sector? Vice versa, from private sector to our scientists. We also noted that the scientists are doing their best without knowing what is it that private sector would want. Because varieties are diverse, and every different player has their own demands or traits that they would want to get in a product. So there is a gap even between from private sector to our scientists. I'll give a very good example on the approach that we are taking as private sector. I think my colleague here mentioned about one of the reasons why we are looking at these varieties. It's the issue of getting forex in Malawi, which is a big challenge. Yet on the other side, demand for our products, which is mostly beans, is also very high. And we look at bean production across the value chain as one of the solutions to bring the forex that Malawi requires. But having done a market research from a private sector angle, we discovered that we have more than 30 varieties that she mentioned. But out of those 30 varieties, only maybe 2 are varieties that our end market are demanding. And yet, we are spending a lot of investment producing materials that at the end of the day are not seeing its end, especially to the market. So these varieties, for now, there are some that are not really going to be utilized simply because of the demand on the market versus the material that we have in Malawi. Then what we've done in that instance is using our partnership with CGIAR through the PABLA programs. We have demanded that we adopt some of the varieties that are in South Africa, so that when we are producing, we are really aligning production to our markets. So we are now using what we are calling market-led approach versus just producing something that we don't know where we'll take it to. So, and then the other one is that we noted that in Malawi, we've been working in silos for a long time. But the coming in of PABRA, they did come up with what they call a multi-stakeholder platform, where for the first time, all the value chain players, including the farmers, were put on one forum. And through that, we've been able to appreciate each other. We've been able to learn from each other. We've been able to share challenges as well as lessons learned from each other. But the most valuable thing that I value about that platform, with a simple WhatsApp group, we are able to get extension service because I'll give a personal example whereby one of my farmers posted a picture that was affected by a disease that we didn't know. And this was somewhere around 12 midnight in my country. I posted it at 12 midnight. Before the end of the other day, I had solutions and I had advice. I had the chemicals recommended that this farmer should apply. And instantly, we saved that crop. So it might look not too effective, but it is very effective to have forums like that. The other issue that I would want to point out is that science is expensive. I did mention that, no, I haven't mentioned, but I would want to mention that in Malawi, we have more than 30 seed companies. Out of all those 30 seed companies, only 1 have their own variety. The rest of us are relying on public material. That is exerting pressure to our scientists because their capacity is challenged. And we are looking at how do we get private sector invest, to pull resources from private sector to invest in this industry, because the demand, the market for the product is available. Now, this is an area that we are working together with CGIAR as well as PABRA to look at how best can we find solutions to, one, make science affordable, and then we also want to make science accessible. So, and the other area that I would want to say is that we have the market. We are ready as private sector to move, to participate, to contribute to the issue of resilience. But all we need is the teamwork, teamwork, teamwork. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. I want to get granular now, right? I mean, we talk about multi-stakeholder partnerships and I don't really always understand what that means. So let's take it down a level and actually explain what that looks like and how that actually functions sort of weekly, daily, monthly, yearly. So you talked about a WhatsApp group where everyone comes together, but I'm going to hand over to Laurent. Maybe he can explain some of the, I mean, it seems trivial, but it's not for people who are trying to learn about how this stuff really works on the ground, particularly for scientists. I'm a scientist myself. I really want to understand how we actually get our science out and into use. So can you be a little granular and come take it down and tell us how this multi-stakeholder partnership actually works?
Thank you very much. I think in my initial points, I indicated that PABRA is one of the good examples. I think through PABRA, as indicated, they managed to bring together key players in the bean value chain. So I mentioned about researchers. These are people who are glued to their books, doing their research to develop varieties. And they also brought on board the private sector, as indicated, and also extension people, together with the CG system. So each of us has a critical role in the value chain. And other actors, I think, which are also there, they are processors, those who add value to the beans which we developed so that it's easily usable by the consumers. So what happened was, in the process, there was clear description of role of each of these partners. So once each of them deliver his or her role, then it all adds up to effective system to deliver issues in the bean value chain. I think that's what I can say in brief.
Thanks heaps. I'm trying to kind of bring it down again to you, Grace, and think about it from your perspective and the private sector perspective. I mean, in a conversation we had a while ago, you talked about trust, right? And about maybe the trust that may not have existed and now the trust that exists now. How did that transition occur?
Thank you very much. And obviously from private sector, we always have challenges to deal with, especially policies that maybe we are challenging. And we've always had challenges between private sector and government on some of the policies that they do effect. I'll just give you an example where they are putting up what we call price setting for commodities. Often a time we do not understand maybe the basis that government has had versus why we feel the price policies should not be there. But let the demand be the tool that we are going to use to market our products. So for some time we used to have all these challenges because we were all in silos. But with the coming up of the forums that we're talking about, all the stakeholders are brought on the table. And then issues that affect private sector are discussed at that neutral table. And then we look at our researchers as, let me call them a referee, who is neutral to both. So you find that using that sort of approach from private sector angle, we have been able to build a very healthy relationship with government. But that aside, for government to make decisions on some of the issues that we do want government to put a policy or to tailor-make a program for us, it requires what they call as government data or reliable data or tangible data. Because from private sector angle, we lack that tangible data. Sometimes the data is there, but the government do not trust our data, and vice versa. So the coming in of this platform has sort of built that relationship to an extent that we are working together with government. I'll give a very typical example of what happened last year for the first time, because bean production in Malawi was always subsistent. And it was mostly promoted by NGOs for different reasons. But last year, government took a position under one of their programs that they're calling Mega Farm. So they supported one of our members or one of the private sector persons to produce for the first time commercially in Malawi 600 hectares of beans. Now, when they engaged, the first step that they took was to discuss, when they brought the issue to government, government wanted tangible data. And it took a scientist to put that data together, because that's a language that government want to hear. What is the impact? How does this profit us as a government? And all sorts of benefits that one would put on the table. And this being presented by a scientist, the issue of trust was definitely there, because scientists are not there for profit. If it was presented by us as private sector, I think the profit angle would have clouded everything else. But that's a typical example. But besides that, when now this private sector person engaged with the government and they saw the need to support him, he had an issue that he needed to bring on the table, which was the issue of very high tariff. Because we have to be competitive for us to penetrate the South African market. So due to that, what government did, they understood and appreciated the issue. They did negotiate on behalf of our private sector person to negotiate with ESCOM to reduce the tariffs. So these are some of the benefits that I can say, and also clearing the mistrust that was with us, because we are now more of a team that is working towards one goal.
Thank you so much. It's such a positive story to hear. And every time I talk to you, I feel like I hear more and more and more about this story. I've got a question for both of you before we hand over to the next panel. So CGIAR and other research providers, NAM, universities, other partners, have done some incredible research over time, and a lot of us have seen that research. But we all have to be honest with ourselves that not all of that research is actually reaching those who can move it into action. What do you recommend going forward to improve the uptake of science into action? And what are some key learnings you think from this example, but beyond, like we're lifting it up now with taking a balcony view, from beyond that and your other experiences, what are some of the key things you can say to a scientist so that they can learn and improve? And what can you also say possibly to a decision maker as well about what they could learn? So how do we get science out of the lab and into use more effectively? What are some of the key lessons we can share? I'll pass to you, Laurent, first.
Thank you very much. I think learning from the PABRA experience, I think what we need to promote as scientists and other institutions like universities, the CGs, the NARS, we have to promote the co-development of programs, joint initiatives, not just the one institution sitting, developing the programs on their own. Because if you leave out NARS, it means we'll be solving problems that are irrelevant. So we need to promote co-development of programs. I think I just like the initiative of 1CG. I think it's one of the pillars that we're promoting, to say we need to co-creation of programs so that we solve the problem farmers are facing in respective countries. And also, what we need to do is to strengthen engagement, I think, between the partners, the NARS, the CGs, all the research institutions. I think I'll give an example for Malawi, the NARS and the CG community. What we've started, a thing which has not been there in the past, is to actually promote frequent interaction between the management of CGs, in the country and the NAS. So we have actually scheduled quarterly meetings. So every year we meet 4 times so that we hybridize the ideas which will actually improve research delivery on the ground. That's what I can say. If we go that route, for sure we are going to develop relevant programs which will actually accelerate promotion of the technologies which we are developing all the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. From the private sector angle, I think what we would want to see is a very robust information system that can produce relevant data or data that can inform all the stakeholders across the value chain. Whether being it a farmer, they should know if there is a variety that can solve their problem. Because as I said, they are different. Others are doing production of beans for forex, others for nutrition, others because they're used to it. It's a woman's club, so they have it, they want to produce. So if we can have data enough that everybody can access, I think that is the one thing that I would want to see happening. But the other one is strengthening of the multi-stakeholder forums. Because honestly, private sector has benefited a lot. I can comfortably tell you that as we sit, we are having interest on seed orders from different countries that are also party to the platform that I'm talking about. So I am able to trade my seed in Zambia, in Swaziland. I'm sure there should be somebody from Swaziland here that is trying to source seed from Malawi. But all that data, all that information is being shared through the multi-stakeholder platform. So I would really want to emphasize a point to say we need to strengthen platforms like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lauren and Grace. We're going to hold questions until after the second panel, and we'll take all the questions together. So hold on to them, and we'll bring them back together. I forgot at the start to say that we're really disappointed, but that Dr. Banda, the Principal Secretary to the Minister of Agriculture from Malawi, couldn't join us for this session. She was very disappointed that she couldn't join, but she's unwell. So I'm hoping that she'll get the chance to watch the video after the event. I'll hand over to Janet now for the second group. We might sit down while they do that.
Thank you, Julianne, and to Grace and to Laurent. Can we give them another round of applause? And as Julianne said, please do hold those questions. I know that they've given us a lot to think about, and we'll come back to that in just a short bit. But I'm going to invite our second panel to please come up to the stage for what, we in that first group, we took a deep dive into one example, and now we're going to broaden things out a little bit and bring in some other perspectives and some geographies, and we'll have a little bit further conversation. All right. So I have with us today, we have Dr. Mazhar Hayat, who is the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination in Pakistan. Dr. Mark Smith is Director General of the International Water Management Institute, which is a CGIAR research center. And Dr. Namako Lukovic is Regional Director for East and Southern Africa for CGIAR. She is also the Director General's representative in Ethiopia for the International Livestock Research Institute and President of the African Nutrition Society, bringing all of her hats with her here today. But Dr. Hayat, I'm going to start with you. Could you tell us about the trade-offs you and your colleagues experience in considering policies and how you use science to decide what action to take?
Thank you very much. This is a very good question and complex as well, because policy making is a very difficult process, basically, with particular reference to the developing countries where the things are basically evolving. Let's take the example of Pakistan. It's a very big country. It has a population of 260 million and almost 798 square kilometer area, and its terrain can be easily divided into 7 cropping zones So you can understand the overall dynamics of a country like Pakistan. On one side, broadly speaking, we are supposed to cater for the energy needs of this much population. On the other hand, we also need to take care of the climate. Same is the case with the resources. Let's take example of water allocation. Allocating water to the agriculture, urban side, industry, and also taking care of rights of the rivers. And we also consider the economic growth versus the environmental sustainability. So if we take examples like this, same is the case with other resources. And if we talk about the equity, you need to take care of the vulnerable communities by giving them subsidies. On the other hand, also taking care of the sustainable development and environmental sustainability, climate change mitigation and adaptation. So the things are very complex. So under these scenarios, it becomes very, very important for us to see the overall picture of all the parameters. And we need science. So science comes here because you cannot decide about such a large population, such a big country while sitting in the rooms or politically motivated decisions. So science becomes very important. And you know, with specific reference to the climate change, we need models, we need data, so that we come up with the needs and requirements of different regions, different communities, and different ecosystems, even the physical systems. So science is very important with reference to policy making, with particular reference to the developing countries where data is not available of the quality of data is not of that much level, and the things become complex here. But what is the solution then? Right now, let me share interesting example. When I started my studies, PhD studies, I was very much energetic and excited, and I came up with a lot of research questions in my mind. But once I started to review the literature, then for some question I came to know that 100 years ago this answer has been done. 50 years ago this research has already been done. Meaning thereby, the answers of the research questions is available there in the literature. But there is a gap. How you are conveying these answers to the policymakers. So this is the main issue. This is the main gap. The second thing is that is about the applied research. In countries like Pakistan, we have universities, we have research organizations, they are doing research, but their perspective most of the times is academic research. It is not applied research. So this is due to the gap between the policymakers and the academia or the researchers. So we need to fill this gap basically and to come up with the solutions in an applied manner so that we are able to solve the problems, the trade-offs I mentioned earlier, in a balanced manner, in a sustainable manner. So these are the things where science is very important. Secondly, from climate change perspective, right now we have global climate models. We need to scale down these models at country level and then scale down these models to the regional levels as well. So this is what we need to come up with crisp information for the policymakers. And sharing information should not be in the big reports or there should be summaries for the policymakers. And reaching out to the policymakers should be easy, very easy. You can share the information maybe in one slide with having few facts and bullets and sharing on maybe Twitter, maybe sharing on other social media, because everybody is using right now. Nobody is going to go for literature. Policymakers are not, most of the times, they don't have time, they don't have, resources to, go and do the literature review that how they are going to make the policy for this. So there should be an easy access to the knowledge, data, and science research for the policymakers. So these are, certain points from my point of view. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, and I think that yes, that accessibility point is definitely a challenge I think that we all face. And Namakolo, that bridges actually over to the question that I'd like to talk to you about. As I said, you wear many different hats, and no doubt each one of those gives you perspective on the challenges that the different stakeholders face in the space of science to action. I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about what you've learned in each of those contexts and across them, but particularly in terms of how research enters the process. And then actually drawing on a point that Grace made earlier about trust, maybe some reflections on how trust gets built into these relationships.
Thank you very much, Janet, and thank you very much to the other panelists. I think that the trust relationships between scientists, policymakers, private sector comes from the quality of engagement, with emphasis on quality of engagement. It is important that scientists do not engage in dialogue with private sector or government only when they are asked to come and say something. So if there is a dialogue that is taking place, us as scientists need to show interest to actually be a part of that dialogue, such that even when you are not invited, you step forward and you say, would it be possible for me to come and be part of this conversation? Not, can I come and present what I have done to you, but can I come and be a part of the conversation? And as part of that dialogue, there are windows that are open then for you to make your suggestions based on the evidence that you have available. I'd like to give you 3 examples, one at each one of those levels. First, starting at continental level, we were very engaged with the African Union in the development of the Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program's results framework. And in that particular case, we wanted to see diet indicators included in the results framework. And because we were around the table and part of the discussion, you could make that suggestion to say, you know what, I see there is something missing here. And then, of course, what they then say is, can you work on that part? And that is then an opportunity for you to bring that information into the conversation. So that was entered into that process. But because of our continued engagement since 2015 to now, we were again approached now in the actual development of the next 10-year program. And for that purpose, then we reached out broader within CGIAR, and of the 13 technical working groups that they put together, in each one of them, we put a CGIAR researcher to be a part of the process. So it wasn't a question of going to write a publication or whatever. We don't really have anything to show for it other than the fact that we were part of the process, and being part of that process, we were able to contribute the evidence that we have. The second example I want to give is the development of the food systems transformation pathway and roadmap for Ethiopia. The Global Panel on Agriculture and Food Systems for Nutrition had released the Foresight Report 2.0 and wanted to have a policy dialogue in Ethiopia. We were approached as CGIAR, and we approached our colleagues that we work with in government to say, can we find out how we can do that? What we then suggested as a collective, the scientists and our government counterparts, we suggested we do not want to use the Foresight Report 2.0. We want to produce our own based on the evidence that is available in the country. And we were able to mobilize available evidence, and the scientists, of course, will always want to publish something. And I had to say to them, we're not going to publish anything, but we'll make use of our evidence. But the outcome of that is the fact that we then produced a transformation pathway that was very extensively informed by evidence. And the trust and that dialogue that builds and the relationships there led to us being able to even suggest we would like to have a monitoring and evaluation framework. And I think Ethiopia currently is actually ahead in that they have developed a monitoring and evaluation framework that speaks to multiple platforms, because then the minister called us and said, you guys don't just think about just food systems. I want to report to SDGs. I want to report to the nationally determined contributions. I want to report to the CADEP process. Can you give me a single list of indicators that my national statistical services can use for routine data collection, so that any time we feel like we are asked to report, the data is actually available? So that's science at work within the policy process. The last example I want to give you is one of the Sokoto Declaration. Again, it's an Ethiopian example. This is an initiative that wants to eliminate stunting for under 2-year-olds in Ethiopia. The good thing about this one is not an issue of us saying science is part of the process, they are monitoring as they go. It's a very multi-sectoral process. But this is now us scientists recognizing it as a good example of multi-sectoral approach. And so we took it as scientists. When we engage with the African Union or with other processes, we would say, but Ethiopia has a good example, and we bring them to come and make that presentation. And so in these engagements, you can see the constance is it's engagement to get us collectively to a better place. It's not engagement to, I have something I'd like you to do because I've got a good idea. The ideas will come along as well. But first and foremost is to develop those relationships so that in the process, you become the go-to persons for solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mark, if I can come to you, you bring a research perspective, but also as Director General of IMI, deep focused in South Asia. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit of your experiences, and maybe particularly drawing on, issues around scaling and innovation.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to take this off because it's off-putting. What I want to do in answering that question is actually draw a distinction between scaling of innovation, so scaling of technologies and what it requires to be successful in that. Draw a distinction between that and the application of innovation in systems change. Because one of my pleas to CGIAR, as an insider, but my pleas to CGIAR, is to think more about this distinction in the way that we work on science to action. So on the example that drawing from our own work in IMI in both Asia and in Africa is around farmer-led irrigation and solar irrigation. So here, the components of working with scaling are about how we move technology up to adoption and then implementation at scale and investment at scale. And that requires, yes, working with technologies, working with co-development of programs with farmers to make sure that those technologies are going to meet people's needs in the best ways they can, and to build capacities around that. but it also means engaging in with knowledge and with multi-stakeholder processes. It means engaging in value chains and the way those function and the way those can be improved in order to better support and catalyze the scaling of that technology, and the way that relates to markets, and the way that relates to the way that financing flows and to whom, in terms of equality issues within that. And understanding that when you look at different contexts, whether that's in Bangladesh, or whether it's in Pakistan, or whether it's in Malawi, or whether it's in Ghana, then you need business models that are going to be informed by those different dimensions in order to ensure that that technology can be taken up and used and be part of the way that development works in those places. So that's the first way of thinking about scaling of innovation. The second is about how systems change and how complex systems change. And here scientists need to be, when we're thinking of science to action, scientists need to be a bit more humble, because there's a lot of things that we don't know. And we are one, and this relates also to what Dr. Hyatt was saying about all of that complexity that you're dealing with in Pakistan, and that the government in Pakistan is trying to navigate their way through. So scientists then bring knowledge and data and evidence to input into those processes and help the different actors at play to navigate the uncertainty, to better negotiate what the way forward is amongst a whole variety of players. And in my own experience, the simple framework for being more effective in working with that systems change, so drawing the distinction from the more technology oriented, is we need to think about how we work at different scales and who we work with and what we're doing. So one component is making sure we're doing things together. In the context of this complexity, how do we work together on solving a local problem? How do we work together on using data, on using models, so that people come together and say, right, yeah, the direction is this. In the context of all of that unknown, the direction is this. And alongside that, working with local level institutions on building greater consensus around that direction is a good direction, and recognizing there's a role that multi-stakeholder platforms play by helping people understand what the issues are, where the solutions lie. And despite all of that complexity and the unknowns, let's go. The third element is higher level dialogue. And here I want to draw on an example from Pakistan. And I apologize, Dr. Hyatt, if I get some of this wrong, but it's illustrative, I hope. So with dialogue and in the context of these complex changes, we need to think, well, how do we change the frame? How do we move the frame from the old ways of doing and thinking about things to new ways of doing and thinking about things while things are uncertain? So the Indus Basin is really interesting in my relatively shallow experience relative to my colleague, because the Indus Basin suffered these terrible floods in 2022, absolutely catastrophic, huge floods. And one of the things that's triggered through high-level dialogue is a rethinking about what the future of the basin should be. So now they talk about the living Indus, which is about restoring the basin and its functions, bringing in an ecosystem-based way of thinking about the future of the basin, the future of agriculture within the basin, as opposed to the old way of thinking about how do we engineer our way out of this. So their dialogue has shifted the frame and enabled that systems change, and they take that into the policy frameworks. So in IMI we work with both of those ways of looking at innovation and scaling. Water is fundamentally a systems substance. It connects across scales, it connects across sectors, and so that systems change has to be inherent in the way that we work, and in the way that indeed CGIAR works on water science and how we bring that into action. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think that captures, very nicely kind of the real importance of the interconnectedness throughout the entirety of the process, and how at different stages of things you have to think about bringing together different groups in different ways. I think that this has probably given us a lot of thought for discussion, but before I open it up, so I'm giving the audience a chance to think about what their questions are for you all and for Grace and Laurent, who we'll invite back up in a moment. I would like to close out this panel with the same question that Julianne asked our other colleagues, which is reflecting on CGIAR and its partners in the research space at the national level, within universities and others, doing some amazing work that doesn't always get connected and into the hands of those who need it. This is, this is what we've been discussing throughout our conversation today. But from your perspective, just in a minute or so, what would you do to remedy this? If you could say, this is one thing that I would like to, to implement to kind of improve the overall process, what would that be? And Dr. Hyatt, can I come to you first?
Thank you very much. I would like to share one observation from the developing countries' perspective. The developing countries have a lot of policies, very beautiful policies, frameworks, action frameworks, strategies, many things. But when it comes to the implementation side, you will see a lot of gaps, many gaps. So what I think, basically, at the policy making level, at the very beginning of the consultative process in the policy making, we miss the scientists, we miss the stakeholders, we miss the communities for whom we are going to design the policies. And the people who are working on the policy design, policy making, they are the stakeholders, but they do not cover all, the stakeholders. So the policy is, approved, put in place, but once it comes to the implementation side, the missing gaps, the backing of the science, the backing of the data, the people who are there with whom you are going to work for implementation of the policy are unaware of that one. So this is one of the failures, that we do not take assistance from the available science or maybe new science based on the policy research questions, and then engaging the stakeholders, as mentioned by my other colleagues, that dialogue is important. So if the things are not moving forward, then you need to think out of the box. You need sometimes a paradigm shift if things are not going moving forward. So this is one of the understanding regarding the engagement, regarding the importance of science in the policy making. Then one more thing. I don't know about other countries, but from hands-on experience from my own country, if one administration, one government is for 5 years, they come up with certain policies, plans and actions. The government changes, the priority changes, the policy changes. And most of the time they shelve the policies because these were made by the previous government or another party sometime. Again, a very big problem. You have investments, you have invested your time, your resources, a lot of things, but you are going nowhere. How to get rid of this? If science is there in those policies, no one can change the science unless those who are new bring some new science, and there is flexibility in the policies to fit in that science into that policy. So if the policies are made without due consideration of the data, due consideration of the models, science, engaging all the stakeholders, then it is very easy for the upcoming government to just shelve those policies. So, but if we engage, all the scientific basis in those policy making, and the actions, the outcomes have been designed in a way that they have, confidence, having scientific confidence in them, then no one is going to negate those policies at later stage. So with this, Science is very important, and you can solve lot of policy problems through the science and data. Thank you.
Okay, you can decide who's gonna take the question first.
For me, I think if I were to do something now that would help us to accelerate progress in the different countries, I would really focus on the transformation pathways that were developed with the UN Food Systems Summit. There's been a lot of talk, were they good enough, and maybe these guys agreed and others didn't agree and all that kind of stuff. But it is the first time that we've had so many countries, the majority of countries in the world, trying to do the same thing at the same time. All of us trying to transform our food systems. So whatever you think might not be good about the pathways that are sitting in a particular country, the point is it is an effort to do things different, and it offers an opportunity for us to engage to propel a momentum forward. So if I had all the money in the world, I would put a lot of money on bringing resources into the countries to allow what has been started to flourish. Because I think we do have enough evidence already that we can deploy now while we look for additional evidence to accelerate going forward. So that will take us forward multiple steps and generate a lot of momentum. I think ignoring them now would do us a disservice because it allows us to lose out on that potential momentum that is already there. I mean, if I look at Africa alone, last time I checked, at least 42 of the 54 countries had pathways. And then the continent has developed a common position on food systems transformation, building on common elements from those different countries. Again, it is a time when we are going to the next 10-year program of CADEP. It is a time when we are looking at the next portfolio of CGIAR, and CGIAR spends 60% of its budget on the African continent. These are multiple stars that have aligned up for us. If we could resource making sure that the evidence we already have makes a difference while we look for other solutions, we would go a long way beyond where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will finish up with this question, and I think I'm going to agree with Namkolo, but use slightly different language. So I talked earlier about the importance, what I feel, of drawing that distinction between scaling, that's about technology to bringing that to scale, versus catalyzing and managing change in the context of complexity. But these two things come together under the idea of what I term mission-driven collective action. And I think that's the same as your pathways. So it's
Remember, they were visionary, informed.
yeah. So indeed, so societies come together. The different actors in society, from government and business and local communities, and define a shared framework for where they're trying to get to, and recognizing that to get there you have to bring together this technological change, if I can simplify, alongside the working through uncertainties in society. And that requires also negotiation and political processes to come into alignment around delivering that societal change. And we have the tools and means to do that. And as I said, sometimes scientists need to be more humble in the way that we approach that, recognizing that in that collective action approach, in that collective action model, we bring one set of skills alongside a whole range of others that are all key to catalyzing that societal change. We have to go faster. The climate context means that we have to go much faster, and we need to be working on the architecture for how that change comes about, and that's what's happening, hopefully, here in this process and in this context. Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you to all three of you for those thoughts. If I could ask our audience to give a round of applause to my three colleagues here for sharing their insights. I am going to step off the stage and ask Grace and Laurent if you would come back up, and we're going to open it up to questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we'll bring the microphone to you. Oh, Julianne has a question. She's going to get us started.
Well, I have a couple of comments to make on reflection after this panel, because I didn't get to ask you questions, so I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. And actually, Mark, we've spoken to a lot of external stakeholders in development of the flagship report, and one of the things people have said to us over and over is CG needs to be a little bit more humble. So, and Namakola, I was reflecting on the food systems pathways. I've done a lot of work in the Pacific region, and they put a lot of effort into not just doing country pathways, but also a regional pathway. And then over the time since then, I've heard disappointment expressed that science hasn't come along to actually then help deliver on those pathways, that scientists aren't using those to guide the science that they're doing. And I hope that's changed since I've left, but that is some of the things that people have said. One of the other things people have said to us over and over and over during the consultations we've done for the for the flagship report is that decision makers are really battling with the trade-offs that you were talking about, Dr. Hyatt, that there's a lot of thinking going into weighing off these trade-offs that they're struggling with. I was wondering, I know you spoke about that already, but I was wondering if you'd unpack a little bit more about how you wrestle with those trade-offs. And you spoke a little bit about some of the tools, maybe information, and what kind of format is the science coming at you that's actually useful? And maybe you could even speak about some of the failings, that things that are coming at you that are not so useful.
Thank you very much. This is an important question, that how to come up with filling up these gaps. Let's take the example of energy sector from climate change perspective. Energy sector is one of the major emitters globally, and this is the need. Everything, technology, our everyday life needs energy. So we have two options. One is to go for a very sustainable, easily available and cheap energy source, maybe fossil fuels, because supply chains are very strong, and you can switch on, switch off the power plant, and you can meet the base load very easily as compared to the renewables. Renewables are intermittent in nature. Maybe solar is working at daytime but not in the night, and wind power, windmills are working at the point when there is wind. If there is no wind, then so they have a lot of intermittent nature challenges. So then we move towards storage of this energy. Then storage, if we talk about the minerals required for the batteries, again a big challenge. So these are different things which you need to plan fast. And at this point in time, you can plan for long-term energy needs by keeping in mind other factors. Say, for example, science tells you that if you are using the fossil fuel, you are going to pay for your health issues. So this is additional budget. Let's take the example of Pakistan right now. One of our cities, Lahore, is right now having smoke, and it is number one polluted city in the world right now. So what's going on there? The schools are closed, The businesses are closed right now. The government has, just like a lockdown. So that there is no activity and people are, having a lot of health issues. So using, I mean, data, using science and integrating all that in decision making can convince the policymakers that although the fossil fuel on one side are very good in terms of availing the energy on sustainable basis, but at the same time they have a lot of challenges in terms of your health, in terms of other things related to the minerals and ecosystem biodiversity issues associated with those ones. So for this we have lot of models: integrated energy resource management, just like integrated water resource management. So our policy documents should be backed by these scientific studies and backed by this evidence, so that we come up with the solutions which are more sustainable with reference to not only the beneficial for the human beings but other species as well, but the whole of the planet as well, and taking care of all the natural resources in the long term scenario. So there are, we can think on other sectors, other requirements, other natural resources in this way, so that we make the policies in a way that that everything is balanced, and the trade-offs are navigated in a way that you grow sensibly and sustainably. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the audience? I'm going to give you a little bit of uncomfortable silence to see if I can pressure a question out of you. Otherwise, we'll carry on. Macaulay, we're gonna go with the panel. And you know what? I'm going to encourage, because some few of you know some of those in the audience. You can also ask the audience some questions if you like.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on your comment on the frustration that the pathways are not leading to anything. One of the things we've done in Ethiopia, because of our continued engagement, Ethiopia is, well, we are lucky. We have 12 CGIAR centers in the country. And so what we've done when they were doing the stock taking last year, we mapped all the CGIAR research projects to the transformation pathway clusters, so that the government is aware what we are working on, and if we do generate good data, where it fits in. And the idea is for us to walk alongside that pathway, that as we generate information that is relevant, it feeds into the process. So that's just one way to try and make sure we don't lose out on that momentum. We are encouraging other countries to do the same. So, yeah, thank you.
That's a wonderful model, and I think that I'll be speaking to some Pacific colleagues about that, because it looks like that's a great example that they could follow. Any questions from the audience? Otherwise, I'm just going to keep asking questions. Oh, we've got them. Okay, Lawrence.
Thank you very much. I think I like the comment about scientists being humble. I think that's a very rare situation. I think scientists have to be humble. They don't know everything. They have to be open to learn more from the audience. But I want to add a little bit more on that, to say even within ourselves, the scientific community, the CG scientists and the NAS scientists, I think there's a lot of issues going on between the two. So I would encourage that also within the scientific community, we need to be very humble amongst ourselves. Nobody knows everything. Thank you.
That's a very good point. I actually found doing my PhD quite a humbling experience. I thought I knew a lot, and then I realized I knew very little by the end of that period of time. So the reason why we've been having this conversation today, and we've had lots of conversations like this, is to help us to develop a CGIAR flagship report, which is a report that's designed specifically to provide a plain language version of CGIAR research for decision makers like those on the panel and those in the audience today. And we've had lots of conversations like this, and it's been fantastic to inform the design of that report. We've spent a lot of time listening to really understand what decision makers need, what format in particular it needs to be in, so that we can deliver something that's actually useful for a decision maker that's sitting in a country like Malawi or Pakistan or Ethiopia. So I'd like to close with going to you all, and I haven't pre-warned you about this, so I'm sorry I'm throwing you under the bus. But what I'd love to get from you, each of you, is one key takeaway for a scientist, and we've talked a lot about this already, one key takeaway for a scientist and one key takeaway for a decision maker. Is there something that they could be doing better? Is there something that they should stop doing? So one key takeaway, if you want someone to really take something and carry it with them from this session or from your learning and your experience, what would you say to a scientist and to a decision maker?
I will say only one point for both, the partners. The gaps between the policymakers and the scientists still exist. These gaps needs to be, taken care of. Thank you.
I think for the scientists, I would say let's provide room for co-creation of programs to integrate various views in the science that we're doing. I think for policymakers, I think resources are always limiting, but I would strongly encourage policymakers to actually put more emphasis on funding science, because that's the driver of the food security that we're talking about. Thank you.
Thank you. For the scientist, I would ask them to consider that they don't come with the answers. They come to decision-making processes with evidence that can be useful in making better decisions. But they don't come with answers that need to be adopted. For the decision maker, and I think the example Dr. Hart gave us, even in the ministry and around the ministry tables, decisions are a negotiation amongst a whole variety of needs with uncertainties. And so in those negotiations, look for and make use of the evidence as input to making better decisions through effective negotiation.
In agreement with what the others have said, what I would like to add to the scientists is that we don't necessarily have the skill sets that we need to actually engage effectively, and we need to be very humble about that. To the policymakers, I would say let's focus on what is it that would actually be catalytic to progress. A lot of our policy instruments speak about all the challenges that we have, and we don't have the resources to address them. And so what would be most catalytic, so that with the little money that we have ourselves, we can put that money to that. And if somebody else comes with a pot of money to help us, then we can do something more. But for the funding that governments have in developing countries, focus on what might be most catalytic at the moment, and then allow people to come and help with other things around that to build some kind of momentum. Because I believe if we can be catalytic, private sector and other entities will come in and do their bit. But if we try to do everything all at once, then we spread ourselves so thin that we don't actually make much progress.
Thank you very much. For our scientists, I think my plea to them would be to try and embrace indigenous knowledge. If they can also learn to build on what is available in our societies, I'm sure some of the varieties that they would develop would have traits that our whether farmers or whoever is there already embraces or already adapt to it. For our policy makers, I think the one thing that I would plead to them is the issue of trying to embrace tailor-made policies that would support some initiatives that private sector is making. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our speakers today for coming and spending their time with us and sharing their learnings. Some of them they didn't have any preparation for, which is wonderful and exciting. And thank you for joining us for the session. So can we please give the speakers a round of applause? And Janet and I will be around after the session if anyone wants to have a discussion or a chat about the flagship report. We'd be happy to have a chat.